Son of man, I have made you a watchman. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. Ezekiel 33:7. In a world asleep at the wall, this space exists to sound the alarm, expose the darkness, and equip believers and seekers alike to see, speak, and stand. I'm your host, James Prosco, Christian, husband, father, veteran, and watchman. And this episode is the echo of the cross. There exists a form of love that knowingly chooses irreversible self-loss with no expectation of return, no explanation, recognition, or survival. And it persists even when belief feels absent. That sentence alone should trouble us, because it describes something that should not exist in a world governed by instinct, advantage, or self-preservation. And this is not affection or loyalty. It's not emotional attachment, moral goodness. It's not duty or instinct, certainly not biology. And it's not even mutual exchange. It is a love that spins itself completely, knowing there will be no reward, no memory, no applause or repayment, only loss. And yet it appears again and again. Men and women stepping forward when they could step back, choosing annihilation over escape. They accept death without bargaining for meaning. They act without assurance that their sacrifice will even be understood. And it's not because they're compelled or programmed, but because something's convinced them quietly and permanently that there is a truth more solid than survival. And this is not an expression of belief. It is a declaration of reality. No one throws themselves into irreversible loss for an illusion. No one gives everything they have for a metaphor. Nobody dies for something they believe is empty. This kind of love does not arise from doubt, but it endures through it. It does not require certainty, but it outlives uncertainty. And it does not ask permission from fear. And long before it was named, long before it was preached, long before it was written down, this love was revealed. Not in theory or philosophy, but in flesh. Jesus doesn't merely speak of this love, he embodied it. He does not negotiate it. He does not dilute it. He didn't reserve it for the deserving, and he did not protect himself from that cost. He gives everything, knowing many will reject him, forget him, misuse his name, or deny he ever existed at all. And then something happens that history cannot explain away. Others follow him into the same pattern. It wasn't safe. It was never rewarded. But because once reality has been redefined by that kind of love, it cannot be unseen. And what follows are not copies of Christ, but echoes, reverberations of a truth so real that it continues to demand everything from those who encounter it. This is not a story about emotion. It's not a story about virtue, about being good. It's a confrontation with a question. What kind of reality produces a love that keeps paying the price even when hope is silent? This is the echo of the cross. Let me try to say this in a way it actually unfolds in my own head, because when I hear it cleared up too much, it loses the thing that made it real in the first place. When I think about this kind of love, the the kind that costs everything. What unsettles me isn't that it exists, it's how little explanation seems to precede it. People don't usually arrive at it after long reflection or careful reasoning. They don't. They don't sit down and weigh the philosophical implications of this kind of love. In the moments that it matters most, there isn't time for that anyway. What happens instead is somebody steps forward and does something that can't be undone. And only afterward do we start trying to make sense of it. And that bothers us because we want the truth to be orderly. We want it to arrive explained, defended, and labeled. We want the reasons first and the consequences last or second. But this love doesn't work that way. The act itself, it just happens, and then almost as an afterthought, meaning tries to catch up to it. And that's what makes it so difficult to reduce when someone willingly enters irreversible loss without demanding anything back. No recognition or justification or assurance. It forces a question that doesn't ask permission. It quietly insists that something is more real than fear, more authoritative than survival, and more binding than instinct. And most of the time, the person offering that love isn't even thinking in those terms. They're not making some kind of statement. They're not trying to say anything at all. But something is being said for sure. Whether they intended it or not, the world is being told that it doesn't get the final word. That kind of declaration doesn't come wrapped in doctrine. It comes wrapped in consequence. That's how faith actually moved into history, not as a system or an argument, but as something lived so decisively that explanation became unavoidable afterwards. And this is where we start getting uncomfortable because it challenges the way we like to think belief really works. We like the idea that we understand first and then commit. That we can reach clarity, then decide that we're willing to risk something. But when you look closely, not just at scripture, but at human experience, the sequence almost never holds when the cost is real. The disciples are a perfect example of this, and not because they were admirable, not because they were honest. They don't even understand Jesus most of the time. They misinterpret him. They argue amongst themselves. They fall to grasp on what he's asking, even when he tells them directly. And then when things turn dangerous, they don't rise to the moment. They fall apart. So if belief were the engine, the whole thing should have collapsed right then and there. But it didn't. And it doesn't. They kept moving forward. And not because everything suddenly made sense, but because something has already happened to them, they cannot reverse. They've encountered something real enough that even confusion can't erase it. And this is the part that we tend to overlook. Obedience often comes before clarity, not afterwards. Not because people are reckless, but because reality sometimes confronts you before you're ready to explain it. Belief struggles to catch up to experience. It limps behind it. And in cases like this, that's not weakness. It's a sign that something larger is at work. We do the disciples a disservice when we turn them into heroes. It makes the story cleaner. It brushes it up. They weren't fearless men marching towards destiny. They were ordinary people making ordinary mistakes, who hesitated, doubted, who ran when they were afraid. And still, years later, with no protection, no advantage left to gain, they died. They gave their lives for what they claimed to have witnessed. And what matters isn't that they died. People die for all kinds of things. What matters is they could have stopped it. They could have softened the story. They could have reframed it. They could have kept the parts that inspired people and then let go of the parts that endangered them. They could have lived, and they weren't chasing martyrdom because they encountered something. And once you encounter something that real, pretending otherwise becomes impossible. It was impossible for them to change direction. And at some point, survival itself started to feel like a lie. That's not courage in the romantic sense. That's being trapped by truth. They are not the origin of this love. They are what happens when it passes through human life and leaves no room to go back. And that's why they're echoes, not sources. An echo doesn't create anything new. It just confirms that something already sounded loudly enough to carry. And this is where the whole thing stops being historical and starts pressing in on us. There's a day in the Christian story where everything goes quiet. Christ dies, the tomb is sealed, God doesn't explain himself. There's no resolution yet, just absence. They stayed faithful when nothing felt certain. They continued to love when consolation disappeared. And this is where that love proves what it really is, because it doesn't depend on God feeling present. We sell that to ourselves. It doesn't collapse when doubt shows up. It doesn't evaporate in silence. It stands there anyway. And that's the point where the question finally becomes unavoidable, because if God were not real, if reality were nothing more than a survival and instinct and self-interest, this kind of love wouldn't be rare. It would be unintelligible. And yet it keeps appearing. The echo. I don't think this ends with an answer, and I don't think it's supposed to. Some things lose their truth the moment we try to wrap them up too cleanly. And when I think about this kind of love, the kind that costs everything, what stays with me is not clarity, it's persistence. It's the fact that it keeps showing up in places where it shouldn't. In moments where there's nothing to be gained, and often where there's no reassurance at all that it means anything to anybody else around you, just you. And it's so hard to dismiss this. If it were just emotion, it would fade. If it was just belief, it would collapse when doubt crept in. But it doesn't. It endures even when the person carrying it can't explain why they're standing there. Still faithful, still unwilling to walk away as if nothing happened. And maybe that's the part we don't know what to do with. That this love doesn't seem to need resolution. It doesn't wait for certainty. It doesn't retreat when God feels silent. It remains quietly, even when the story hasn't caught up to what's already been lived. I thought about Holy Saturday and how it makes sense to me in that light. Not as a problem to solve, but as a place people actually live. A space between that promise and fulfillment where nothing feels settled and yet something still holds us. Where the absent doesn't erase what came before and the silence doesn't undo what was already given. I'm not trying to tell you what this means for you, because that would cheapen it. And some truths just don't ask for agreement. They just sit there, waiting to be reckoned with long after the noise dies down. If God weren't real, this love, it wouldn't just be rare. It would make no sense at all. And yet it keeps appearing again and again and again across history, across lives, across moments that never make the headlines. You never hear of the stories, the lives that live this kind of love. And this is the part I can't unsee, just as something that continues to echo. Whether we're ready for it or not. And maybe that's enough for now. God bless, and thanks for listening.